In this tutorial, we're going to learn how to make doors. I'm going to begin by showing you how to make a sliding door, and then later show you how to make a rotating door. I've started with the original test map that I made for the Room 101 tutorial. It's a good one to work with. It's a small box with a player spawn point, a light. That's great for quickly compiling, quickly testing a level. That's all we need. Let's begin by selecting a texture. I'll go over into our media, textures. I want to load up the base doors. There's some good textures in there. Look for something that's visually pleasing here. Here's a good door to work with. Doesn't matter what we pick right now because we're just learning. Alright, I'm going to draw out our basic door first. Find the brush we just made, bring it into position. Let's try to get that texture lined up a little bit. There we go. That's a good looking door. Now we want to turn it into a door. We're going to turn it into an entity called a function door. I'm going to right click the entity itself, go to function, function door. There we go. Now we have to tell it which way to slide when we walk up to it. So I'm going to either click down here into the entity area, or I could hit N on the keyboard and it would bring up the same editor. Let's give ourselves some room to work. And now what we want to do is we want to tell it which direction to move, the move direction. If you look in here, there's some good hints. We're looking for move direction. Now a very easy way to do this is with this button configuration down here. If I press 90, you'll see it entered in the move direction 90, which means that when I walk up to the door here, it's going to slide left. It's going to slide in that direction for me. That's it. Our door is created. I can save the map and compile it. I'll run BSP. Now I'll hit F2 on the keyboard. It'll open up our game. Type in dev map game mp test, because that's where the test map has been saved and compiled, and run it. Alright, now you'll see when I walk up to it, the door slides open perfectly. And it'll work on both sides. All I have to do is walk right up to the door. Alright, now let's make ourselves a rotating door instead of just sliding. Quick way out of here, open the console, type exit. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to get rid of the door that we just created, because turning that into a rotating door will just cause confusion for the editor later. So I'll make sure nothing is selected so that I only have my door selected, and I can hit the backspace key to delete it. Let's give ourselves a little more room to work. Okay, let's create a new door brush. There we go, there's a good brush to work with. Move that into view a little bit. Now, we're going to turn this one into a function mover entity. Function mover. That means whenever we script it, it'll move into a particular area, it'll move in a direction, it'll move in a certain orientation. In our case, it's going to rotate. Now you see this little dot here? That dot is actually the point of origin, which means in the case of rotating, it'll rotate around that center mark. And that's no good for the door that we want to make. We want that point of origin to be over here. And the easiest way to move that origin point is to actually reshape the brush so that it's at that rotation point. Now you'll see our texture got a little bit screwed up. So I'm going to click in there, make sure the texture is selected. It just reset itself because it was over here. But in any case, say the door was over here, you want to reset that texture. If I hold down the Shift key and move the arrows, you'll see that texture over there in the window moving in the direction of the arrows that I'm pointing at. Very nice and simple way to move the texture. Move it visually. Now we have that texture. We want to open up the entity editor. And we got to give this door a name so that we can call to it later. So let me enter in name in the key. I'll give it a name of my door. It's a good simple name. Now we can deselect our entity because we don't want to mess that up when we create our next one. What we're going to do now is create the trigger, the item that causes the door to rotate. I'm going to create a trigger so that whenever the player walks up to it, it automatically causes the door to open. What that's called is a trigger multiple, because it'll be triggered a multiple number of times, not just once, but any time that the player walks up into that trigger area. So what I want to do is I want to select the proper texture. Got all those textures in memory, so things are running a little slower. Okay, let's load up. In the common textures, you'll see, if I scroll down, you'll find Trig Multi, which is trigger multiple. Let's select that, and let's draw out our trigger brush. Now, it only really needs to be big enough that whenever the player walks into it, it triggers. We can make it the full size of the door. We can make it just big enough, but I don't want to make it too high so that the player can crawl under it, or too low that the player could accidentally jump over it. I'm just going to fill in this whole area. Then I have all my bases covered. Now let's turn that into a trigger multiple. I'm going to right-click it, scroll down the trigger, turn that into a trigger multiple entity. Now, I want to give this a name. I want to give it a call. What I mean by that is, whenever the trigger is used, it'll call to the script that I'm going to be creating in the next step, actually. So let's go into the entity. Here we have the trigger multiple selected. That's the only one we have. That's good, because we don't want to screw up any of the other entities. I am going to give it a call, and I'm going to call it Rotate My Door. That's a good one. You can call these anything you want as long as you keep the same naming pattern throughout, which will make more sense by the end. Now we also want to make a wait. See, whenever you use a trigger multiple, it's just going to keep triggering while the player is over top of it or keeps moving through it. And in this case, we want it to trigger once, then wait a little while before it triggers the door to go again. So for now, I am going to give it a wait. Make it wait for a certain amount of time. I'll make it 6. We may have to adjust the number later, but it's a good number to start with. Now we are done with this entity for the moment. We can close that out. The next thing we want to do is we want to go in. Let's now go ahead and create the script that's going to cause this whole thing to work. Open up your notepad or some other text editor. Here we go. And we're going to need to type in some commands here, some scripting. This is where it gets dirty. Alright. What we're going to do is we're going to create a script called Rotate My Door. That's what we just made the call to in the trigger multiple. So we'll go void rotate my door. I'll give it a few lines. And what you have there is your basic script. There's nothing going on in the middle, but we just made a script that's called Rotate My Door. Now let's give it some functions. Now, since the name of the door is called My Door, we're going to go My Door. And we're going to say rotate to. That means we're going to rotate to a specific orientation. 0, 90 degrees, 0, from where it began. Which means that it's going to rotate 0. It's going to rotate 90 degrees in that vertical axis from where it began. Now the door will rotate. But there's a number of other things we need to do in here. We need to say, how fast will that door open? The door could open within a 10-second time frame, or very quickly. In this case, I want to open up pretty quickly. A good door speed would be like 1 second. So let's say, take my door. The time it takes to open will only be 1 second. Now the door will open within a 1 second time frame. Next, we want to say what the door should do after it has opened. Let's make the door wait. System wait for 3 seconds. The door is going to open and wait for 3 seconds, and now we want the door to close again. So let's rotate it back to its original orientation, and let's make it take another 1 second to do it. So actually I could save some typing time and bring this back to 0. So now it's back to where it originally began. Now the door is going to open 90 degrees and take 1 second to do it. It's going to wait 3 seconds, and then it's going to take another second to close again, which is about 3, 4, that's about 5 seconds of time. We're going to need to know that number so that we can we can type it into one of the other entities that we did. Remember we did a wait time? Here you can see it down here. The trigger multiple, we said wait for about 6 seconds. 6 seconds is a pretty good number because what it can do is it can go through the whole process and not be triggered again until it has completed. So if it takes 5 seconds to complete, let's wait 6 seconds before the trigger can actually occur again. Now let's save this file. Let's save it as, now it's a good practice to name these files the same name as your map. So in this case, my map name is test, and we want to create a script file, so we're going to call this test.script. And let's save this in our maps directory. So we'll go over to where that is located. Let's see, Doom 3, base, maps, game, MP, all these directories. And let's save it as test.script. Save. Done. We can close that because we are done. Now I'm going to go back in and make sure that there aren't any errors. Sometimes it'll save as a .script.text, and we don't want that. We want to make sure it is named test.script. So it looks like everything is okay there. Now, before we continue, we need to go into the world spawn. We need to tell this map where to find the script file that we just created. So I can click on any brush in here, escape, just as long as nothing is selected. You can see it automatically brought me to the world spawn as soon as I clicked on a non-entity brush. I'm going to make sure I escape, deselect everything, and now I'm going to go in and I am going to tell it to call to that script. I am going to say script test.script. Hit enter to put that into the memory, and now that's it. Now what's going to happen is the map's going to load. The world spawn is going to tell it to load test.script. So now when the player walks up to this entity, the trigger, it's going to call rotate my door, which is the script inside that script file that we just wrote. We just wrote that void rotate my door. And it's going to force the door, which is named my door, to perform the script that we wrote. Sounds a little complicated, but I think by the time you've gotten through this, it'll make a lot of sense. Alright, save it, run the BSP, let's watch this work. Hit F2. Since it's still in memory, I just hit the arrow up to bring back the previous commands that I wrote. Let the map load. Now, look at that. It rotated to an open position, automatically closed. Now right in here is where that trigger is. You don't see it because I used the trigger multiple texture. Walked right up, I can walk around it. I'm still walking in that, I'm trying to trigger, it's not triggering anymore, there it goes. Because it waited the full 6 seconds before it was allowed to go again. Now as I'm walking around the door, there you go. That's how you do your doors. Happy mapping.